Olivia Hayes worked on fighter jets for 5 years at Westridge Air Base. She fixed what others could not while pilots flew the planes she kept running. She had a special gift. She understood aircraft not just as parts to fix but as living machines, with voices only she could hear. The morning she sat in the forgotten SV-33 Kingfisher would change everything. It would show a talent that would save lives when no one else could. Before we continue, tell us where you are watching from. If this story touches you, make sure you subscribe. Tomorrow, I have something extra special for you. The early April sunrise painted the Montana mountains in purple and gold as Olivia walked across the runway with her toolbox. Unlike other workers, who came right at shift change, she liked the quiet of dawn. She could hear the whispers of the aircraft without the noise of the flight line. Another day keeping these birds in the air so someone else can have all the glory, she said to herself. She was not bitter but had accepted her place. At 32, Olivia had spent more time with aircraft than most pilots. She had rebuilt engines in her father's crop duster shop since she was 12. She joined the Air National Guard at 18 hoping to fly. But she ended up in maintenance when her flight school application was rejected 3 times for not having enough leadership qualities. The morning briefing was the same as always. Chief Master Sergeant Donovan stood before the maintenance crew with his clipboard and the day's assignments. "Hayes, you have the problem child today," he said, handing her a work order. "Kingfisher 627 is making strange noises on startup. 3 different workers could not figure it out. See what you can do." Olivia nodded, trying not to smile. The problem. Children were her specialty. These were the aircraft that confused everyone else, the ones with issues that did not appear in any manual. She had a skill for understanding what an engine was trying to tell her through its beats and vibrations. "You should have been an aircraft whisperer instead of a wrench turner," her father used to say. The SV-33 Kingfisher sat alone in Hangar 7. It was a forgotten relic among the sleek F-35s and F-22s that filled Westridge's flight line. The Kingfisher was designed for search and rescue in extreme conditions. It had been revolutionary 15 years ago with its vertical takeoff abilities and amazing movement in tight spaces. This aircraft, tail number 627, had been grounded for months. The younger workers avoided it. They said it was cursed after 3 different pilots reported control issues that nobody could copy on the ground. Olivia ran her hand along the Kingfisher's body, feeling the small imperfections under her fingertips. "What is wrong with you, old girl?" she whispered. "What are you trying to tell these people that they are not hearing?" She climbed into the cockpit and sat in the pilot's seat. This was not her first time in a cockpit. She often ran engine tests from the pilot's position. But today felt different. Somehow, Olivia put her hands on the controls, closed her eyes, and listened. Not to the sounds of the hangar, but to the aircraft itself. This was her secret technique. It had earned her both respect and doubt from coworkers over the years. "Let's see what you have to say," she said, starting the engines. The engines came to life, their hum built to a familiar roar. But Olivia immediately found the problem. A small vibration that happened exactly 3 seconds after full power. She adjusted the throttle slightly, feeling how the vibration changed. "There you are," she whispered, smiling. "Fuel injector problem in the secondary system. You only use it during high-stress moves. That is why they cannot copy it on the ground." 4 hours later, Olivia had taken apart, fixed, and put back together the fuel injection system. As she wiped her hands on a shop rag, she heard footsteps coming closer. "Any luck with our problem child?" Chief Donovan asked. "Fixed," Olivia replied. Fuel injector was off by 0.03 millimeters, only noticeable under high-stress conditions. Donovan raised an eyebrow. "And how exactly did you find that without putting it under high-stress conditions?" Olivia shrugged. "I listened." Before Donovan could respond, The hangar doors opened. A group of pilots walked in with perfect flight suits and aviator sunglasses despite being indoors. At their center walked Major James Carson, squadron commander and the base's most decorated pilot. "Chief," Carson nodded to Donovan, then looked at Olivia. "This the maintenance worker you mentioned?" "Yes, sir, Olivia Hayes, best troubleshooter we have." Carson looked at Olivia with polite disinterest. He saw maintenance workers as basically the same. "You fixed the Kingfisher?" Preparing and telling this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Yes, sir, she is ready to fly." Carson's eyebrow twitched at Olivia's use of "she" to describe the aircraft. "Good. We need it working for a training exercise next week." One of the younger pilots, Lieutenant Ryan Mitchell, laughed. "Why are we even bothering with this dinosaur? Thing belongs in a museum." "Because, Lieutenant," Carson replied sharply, "the Kingfisher can access terrain that our newer aircraft cannot. For certain rescue scenarios, it is still the best tool we have." Olivia bit her tongue. She wanted to defend the aircraft more. These pilots saw the Kingfisher as old technology. They did not understand its unique abilities because they had never been trained to use them properly. As the pilots continued their inspection, Olivia heard Lieutenant Mitchell talking to another pilot. "Can you believe maintenance thinks they understand these machines better than we do? They are just mechanics." The words hurt, but Olivia was used to it. The divide between maintenance and pilots was as old as flying itself. Later that afternoon, Olivia was completing her paperwork on the Kingfisher repair. An unexpected visitor came to her workbench. Colonel Sarah Weber, base commander and one of the few female senior officers at Westridge. "Hayes," Colonel Weber said, "I hear you fixed the Kingfisher when no one else could." Olivia stood quickly. "Yes, ma'am, just a calibration issue." Weber studied her with sharp eyes. "I was looking at your service record. 3 applications to flight school, all rejected." Olivia's face warmed. "Yes, ma'am." "Do you still want to fly, Hayes?" The question caught her off guard. Yes, more than anything," Weber nodded thoughtfully. "I have authorized a flight aptitude reassessment. Report to Simulator Building 3 tomorrow at 0700. Before Olivia could process what was happening, Weber added, "The Kingfisher was my aircraft when I was a major. I flew search and rescue missions in Afghanistan with it. There is more to that aircraft than most people understand." As Weber turned to leave, she paused. "And Hayes? Do not let anyone tell you you are just maintenance. The best pilots I have ever known started by understanding how their aircraft worked from the inside out." The next morning, Olivia arrived at the simulator building 30 minutes early. Her heart was pounding. She had spent half the night reviewing flight manuals and the other half trying to calm her nerves. This was her chance. Perhaps her last one. To prove she belonged in the cockpit, not just beneath it with a wrench. Major Carson was waiting for her, along with a flight instructor she did not recognize. "Hayes," Carson nodded. "Colonel Weber seems to think you have potential. Let's see if she is right." The simulator was set up for the SV-33 Kingfisher. Its controls exactly matched the aircraft she had repaired the day before. Olivia sat in the seat, running her hands over the familiar controls. "We will start with basic flight patterns," the instructor said, "then move to more complex scenarios. Just do your best." Olivia nodded, took a deep breath, and started the virtual engines. The moment her hands touched the controls, something clicked. Years of feeling how engines responded to adjustments, understanding the small vibrations and sounds that showed an aircraft's condition. All of it turned into an intuitive sense of how the Kingfisher wanted to fly. 3 hours later, Major Carson was staring at the simulation results in disbelief. "She outperformed every first-time simulator run in our database," he told Colonel Weber, who had joined them for the final scenarios. Her handling in the mountain rescue simulation was, "I have never seen anything like it," Weber smiled. "I thought so." She feels the aircraft. "But she has no formal flight training," Carson protested. "It is against all protocols to fast-track someone from maintenance to pilot status." "I am not suggesting we break protocol, Major," Weber replied coolly. "I am suggesting we recognize talent when we see it. Put her through the accelerated program. If she fails, no harm done. If she succeeds." The accelerated flight training program was brutal, designed for experienced pilots transitioning to new aircraft, not for maintenance personnel with no formal flight experience. For 6 weeks, Olivia barely slept, dividing her time between simulator hours, classroom instruction, and physical training. The other trainees, all experienced pilots, initially viewed her with skepticism that bordered on hostility. "You know why they're letting a wrench-turner play pilot, right?" Lieutenant Mitchell commented loudly one day in the briefing room. "Diversity quota. Base needs more female pilots for the congressional inspection next month." Olivia ignored the comments, focusing instead on proving herself through performance. Day by day, her simulator scores climbed higher, particularly in rescue scenarios involving difficult terrain, mountain passes, narrow canyons, ice fields. The very situations where the Kingfisher excelled. After the 5th week, even Mitchell had fallen silent as Olivia consistently outperformed him in the simulator. Major Carson, who supervised the final evaluations, maintained his professional distance, but couldn't hide his surprise at her progress. "You fly like you've been doing this for years," he commented after watching her navigate a particularly challenging mountain rescue scenario. "Where did you learn these techniques?" "From the aircraft," Olivia replied honestly. "Every time I fixed one, I learned how it wanted to move." Carson shook his head, clearly not understanding, but unable to argue with the results. On the final day of training, Colonel Weber appeared in the simulator room. "Hayes, you've completed the accelerated program with the highest scores we've seen in 5 years. There's just one test left, ma'am. Actual flight time. You need 50 supervised hours before you can be certified, even on a provisional basis." Olivia's heart sank. 50 hours would take weeks, maybe months to accumulate, especially since she wasn't an official pilot candidate. "However," Weber continued, "given your unique background and exceptional performance, I've authorized an alternative path. You'll fly as co-pilot on training missions with the Kingfisher, supervised by experienced pilots, starting today." 2 hours later, Olivia found herself in the cockpit of Kingfisher 627, running through pre-flight checks with Major Carson in the pilot seat. "Remember, Hayes, this isn't a simulator. Stick to the basics, follow my lead, and don't try anything fancy. This is just to get you comfortable with the real thing." Olivia nodded, but as her hands touched the actual controls of the aircraft she'd spent so many hours repairing, she felt an immediate connection that went beyond anything she'd experienced in the simulator. This wasn't just an aircraft, it was her aircraft, one whose every quirk and characteristic she understood at a level most pilots never would. The Kingfisher lifted off smoothly, transitioning from vertical to forward flight with the grace that made it famous among rescue pilots. Carson put the aircraft through a series of basic maneuvers, occasionally allowing Olivia to take control for short periods. "Not bad," he admitted as she executed a perfect banking turn. "Your touch is different, smoother than most new pilots." "She likes to be guided, not forced," Olivia replied, then immediately regretted anthropomorphizing the aircraft to a senior officer. To her surprise, Carson nodded. "That's exactly right. Most pilots try to impose their will on the aircraft. The best ones work with it instead." They were halfway through the planned flight pattern when the radio crackled with an urgent message. "Kingfisher 627. This is Westridge Control. We have an emergency situation. Civilian helicopter down in Black Rock Canyon. 2 injured hikers on board. Search and rescue units are 2 hours out, and weather is deteriorating rapidly. You're the only aircraft in range with appropriate capabilities." Carson immediately acknowledged the message and turned the Kingfisher toward the coordinates provided. "Hayes, this is now an actual rescue mission. I'll handle it, but stay sharp and follow my instructions precisely." Olivia nodded, studying the topographical display that showed Black Rock Canyon, one of the narrowest, most treacherous valleys in the region, with walls that rose almost vertically for thousands of feet and unpredictable wind patterns that could slam an aircraft into rock with no warning. As they approached the canyon, the weather deteriorated visibly. Dark clouds rolled in from the west, and the wind buffeted the Kingfisher with increasing force. "Control, this is Kingfisher 627, Carson radioed. "Weather conditions at Black Rock are marginal. Visibility dropping, wind gusts exceeding 40 knots. Request alternative extraction options." "Negative, Kingfisher. You're all we've got. Weather front is moving in fast. If you don't reach those hikers in the next 20 minutes, we lose our window completely." Carson studied the canyon entrance, jaw tight. Too risky. These conditions would be challenging in clear weather. With this wind and visibility, Olivia looked at the canyon, then at the weather radar. She could see what Carson saw. The conventional approach was too dangerous. But she also saw something else. Something she'd learned from years of understanding how the Kingfisher moved and responded. "Sir," she said carefully, "there's another way in." Carson looked at her sharply. "Hayes, you're a trainee with zero actual rescue experience." "Yes, sir, but I've studied this aircraft for years. The side valley to the east, it's narrower but more sheltered from the wind. The Kingfisher can handle the tight space better than any other aircraft we have. That approach isn't in any manual, no sir. But the Kingfisher can do it." "I know she can." Carson hesitated, clearly torn between protocol and the urgent needs of the injured hikers. He glanced at the weather radar again, then made his decision. "I'm going to attempt the standard approach. It's our best option." The Kingfisher dove toward the canyon entrance, immediately encountering violent turbulence that threw the aircraft sideways. Carson fought the controls, his experience evident in how quickly he corrected, but the wind was relentless, slamming them from all sides. "We can't maintain this course," he grunted, pulling back on the stick to gain altitude. "Control. Kingfisher 627. Standard approach not viable. We need to abort." Olivia watched the altimeter climb as they retreated from the canyon, knowing what this meant for the injured hikers below. With each passing minute, their chances diminished. "Sir," she said with a conviction that surprised even her, "let me try the eastern approach." "Absolutely not. You're not even a certified pilot." "With respect, Major, I know this aircraft better than anyone on this base. I've rebuilt her engines, calibrated her control surfaces, realigned her rotors. I know exactly what she can do and how she respond in that canyon." Carson stared at her, conflict evident in his expression. "You're asking me to hand control of a multi-million-dollar aircraft to a maintenance tech during a high-risk rescue operation. I'm asking you to trust that sometimes the person who fixes the engines might know something about flying them." For what seemed like an eternity, Carson was silent. Then he made a decision that would change both their lives. "Take the controls, Hayes, but I'm overriding you at the first sign of trouble." Olivia's hands closed around the stick, and in that moment, everything else faded away. The pressure, the doubt, the years of being overlooked. There was only the Kingfisher and the canyon and the lives depending on her. She banked the aircraft sharply east, dropping altitude to approach the narrow side valley she'd identified. It was barely wider than the Kingfisher's wingspan in places, a twisting corridor of rock that no pilot would willingly enter without absolute confidence. "Hayes, this is insanity," Carson said, his knuckles white on the edge of his seat. "There's no room for error here. "There doesn't need to be," Olivia replied, her focus absolute as she guided the Kingfisher into the valley entrance. "She knows what to do." The aircraft responded to her touch with precision that bordered on telepathic. Where Carson had fought against the wind, Olivia used it, letting the gusts push the Kingfisher where she needed it to go, compensating with micro-adjustments that seemed to anticipate the air currents before they hit. The valley narrowed further, rock walls closing in on both sides. Olivia adjusted the rotors to vertical configuration, transitioning the Kingfisher to its helicopter mode with a smoothness that made Carson stare in disbelief. "How are you doing this?" he asked as they slipped through a gap that seemed impossibly tight. "5 years of listening to what these engines tell me," Olivia replied, her eyes never leaving the terrain ahead. "Every vibration, every sound, they're all telling you something if you know how to listen." The crashed helicopter came into view, perched precariously on a narrow ledge halfway up the canyon wall. 2 figures waved frantically as the Kingfisher approached. "There's no landing zone," Carson pointed out. "Nearest flat surface is half a mile away." "We don't need to land," Olivia replied, bringing the Kingfisher to a hover just 20 feet from the cliff face, holding it perfectly steady, despite the swirling winds. "We hover, drop the rescue harness, pull them up one by one." It was a textbook rescue operation executed with precision that belied Olivia's lack of official flight experience. Within 15 minutes, both injured hikers were secured in the Kingfisher's medical bay, and Olivia was navigating back through the narrow valley, making the impossible look routine. As they emerged from the canyon into open air, Carson was silent for a long moment before keying his mic. "Control, this is Kingfisher 627. We have successfully extracted both subjects. They're stable and we're returning to base." He turned to Olivia, his expression a mixture of disbelief and respect. "In 20 years of flying, I've never seen anyone handle an aircraft like that. Where did you learn those techniques?" Olivia smiled slightly, hands still steady on the controls. "From the aircraft, sir. I've been listening to them my whole life. Today, this one finally got to speak through me." The return to Westridge Air Base brought a reception Olivia could never have imagined. As the Kingfisher touched down, emergency medical teams rushed forward to transfer the injured hikers to the base hospital. Behind them stood Colonel Weber, Chief Donovan, and what appeared to be half the base personnel, all watching in stunned silence as Olivia Hayes, maintenance technician, powered down the aircraft she had just flown through impossible conditions. When she stepped onto the tarmac, the silence broke. Not with cheers or applause, but with the quiet murmurs of people witnessing something they couldn't quite believe. Major Carson emerged behind her, removing his helmet. He approached Colonel Weber and spoke words that would change the trajectory of Olivia's life forever. "Colonel, I'd like to formally recommend Olivia Hayes for immediate entry into the full pilot training program. What she did today wasn't just impressive, it was something I'm not sure I could have done myself." Colonel Weber's office was a study in military precision, every item perfectly placed, every surface spotless. Olivia sat uncomfortably in the visitor's chair, still wearing her flight suit from the rescue mission, her mind racing with the implications of what had just happened. Across the desk, Weber studied her with an expression that revealed nothing. "So," the colonel finally said, "you flew a multi-million-dollar aircraft through a canyon most experienced pilots wouldn't attempt, using techniques that aren't in any flight manual to rescue 2 civilians when conventional approaches failed." Olivia swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am." "And you did this on your first actual flight, with no formal pilot training beyond 6 weeks in a simulator?" "Yes, ma'am." Weber leaned back in her chair, her expression softening slightly. "In 30 years of military service, Hayes, I've never seen anything like the flight data from your rescue operation. Your control inputs were unconventional, to say the least." Olivia tensed, preparing for reprimand. What she had done violated numerous protocols, regardless of the outcome. Permission to speak freely, ma'am. Granted. I know the aircraft, Colonel. Not just its systems or its capabilities on paper, but how it feels in different conditions. How it responds to stress. When you've rebuilt something piece by piece, you develop a relationship with it that goes beyond technical specifications. Weber nodded slowly. Major Carson said something similar. He said you flew the Kingfisher like you were having a conversation with it, not commanding it. That's an accurate description, ma'am. The colonel stood and walked to the window, looking out at the flight line where the Kingfisher sat, surrounded by curious personnel. Did you know the SV-33 program was nearly canceled 5 years ago? Too expensive, too specialized, not enough qualified pilots who could handle its unique characteristics. No, ma'am, I didn't. I fought to keep it. The Kingfisher can access terrain no other aircraft can navigate safely. It saved hundreds of lives in situations where conventional aircraft would be useless. Weber turned back to face Olivia. But we've been struggling to find pilots who truly understand how to fly it to its full potential. She returned to her desk and opened a folder. Your personnel file makes for interesting reading, Hayes. Top of your class in technical training. 3 rejected applications to flight school. Multiple commendations for solving maintenance issues others couldn't figure out. She closed the file and fixed Olivia with a penetrating stare. Why were you so determined to become a pilot? Olivia took a deep breath. My father was a crop duster in Nebraska, ma'am. He taught me that flying isn't just about moving through air, it's about becoming part of it. I've wanted that connection my whole life, and yet you ended up in maintenance. The closest I could get to the aircraft. If I couldn't fly them, I could at least keep them flying. Weber nodded thoughtfully. Your father taught you well. What you did today wasn't just skill, Hayes. It was intuition. The kind that can't be taught in any flight school. She pulled another folder from her desk drawer, this one bearing security classification markings. What I'm about to tell you is classified. Operation Windwalker is a specialized search and rescue initiative focusing on extraction from extreme environments, places conventional aircraft can't reach, where traditional rescue techniques fail. Olivia straightened in her seat, sensing the shift in the conversation. The program has been in development for 3 years. Weber continued, but we've faced a consistent problem, finding pilots with the right mindset. Technical proficiency isn't enough. Windwalker requires pilots who can adapt instantly to changing conditions, who can feel the aircraft as an extension of themselves. Like the canyon rescue today, Olivia said quietly. Exactly like that. Weber opened the classified folder, revealing photographs of terrain so forbidding it seemed impossible any aircraft could navigate it. Narrow mountain passes, ice-choked ravines, densely forested valleys with barely enough clearance for rotors. These are places where people die because we can't reach them. Places where conventional wisdom says rescue is impossible. She fixed Olivia with a steady gaze. I'm offering you a chance to prove conventional wisdom wrong. You want me for Operation Windwalker? But I'm not even a certified pilot. That changes as of this morning. Your rescue operation has been designated as your practical qualification flight. Given the extraordinary circumstances and Major Carson's recommendation, you're being granted provisional pilot status, with the understanding that you'll complete the formal training requirements concurrently with your Windwalker duties. Olivia sat in stunned silence, trying to process the rapid transformation of her life. This isn't standard procedure, Weber acknowledged. But then, nothing about your situation is standard. Sometimes the right person for a job isn't the one with the perfect resume. It's the one who sees possibilities others don't. What exactly would I be doing in Windwalker? Initially, training, both giving and receiving. You'll work with our team to develop new extraction techniques for impossible environments. You'll also undergo intensive flight training to expand your skills beyond the Kingfisher to other specialized aircraft. Weber closed the folder. But most importantly, you'll be on call for the missions no one else can fly. The ones that push the boundaries of what's considered possible. Olivia felt a surge of something she hadn't experienced in years. Pure, unreserved hope. When do I start? Immediately. Report to Hangar 12 at 0600 tomorrow. And Hayes? The people you'll be working with, they're the best of the best. They'll respect your abilities once they see them demonstrated, but don't expect a warm welcome right away. Exceptional talent often faces exceptional resistance. The warning proved accurate. When Olivia entered Hangar 12 the next morning, the reception was decidedly frosty. The Windwalker team consisted of 8 pilots, all with years of experience and distinguished service records. Their expressions as Colonel Weber introduced her ranged from skeptical to openly hostile. Captain Deanna Rodriguez, the team's operations officer, was the first to speak after Weber finished explaining Olivia's unusual recruitment. With respect, Colonel, we're talking about missions where split-second decisions mean life or death. How can we integrate someone with virtually no flight experience? Captain Hayes has demonstrated exceptional aptitude, Weber replied firmly. Yesterday's rescue operation speaks for itself. One lucky flight doesn't make her qualified for Windwalker, Rodriguez countered. Olivia stepped forward. I understand your concerns, Captain. I'd have the same ones in your position. All I ask is the chance to demonstrate what I can do. Rodriguez looked her up and down, then glanced at Weber. The canyon simulation, then. Let's see how maintenance handles that. The canyon simulation was Windwalker's most challenging test, a virtual reality recreation of a rescue scenario, so difficult that only 3 of the 8 team members had successfully completed it. It combined unpredictable weather, extremely narrow passages, and mechanical failures that required instantaneous adaptation. As Olivia strapped into the simulator, she could feel the team's eyes on her, expecting, perhaps even hoping for, failure. This was more than a test of skills. It was a test of belonging. The simulation began with a deceptively straightforward approach to a canyon system. But as Olivia guided the virtual Kingfisher into the first narrow passage, the scenario unleashed its full fury: violent crosswinds, rapidly deteriorating visibility, and a sudden engine warning light that indicated imminent failure of the port thruster. Where other pilots might have panicked or retreated, Olivia felt an almost preternatural calm descend. The canyon narrowed further, barely wider than the Kingfisher's rotor span. Olivia descended, using the natural contours of the rock walls to shelter from the worst of the crosswinds, flying so close to the stone that the team watching the external view held their breath. Then came the simulation's infamous needle, a vertical shaft barely wide enough for the Kingfisher, requiring a transition from horizontal to vertical flight while maintaining perfect position to avoid striking the walls. It was here that most pilots failed, unable to execute the precise control inputs needed while simultaneously managing the failing engine. Olivia approached the needle, then did something unexpected. She cut power completely for 2 seconds, allowing the Kingfisher to drop into the shaft, then re-engage the engines in vertical configuration just as the aircraft aligned with the narrow passage. It was a technique no one had attempted before, eliminating the complex transition maneuver by essentially letting gravity do the work. The virtual Kingfisher descended through the needle with mere inches of clearance on all sides, emerging into a small cavern where the simulated rescue target waited. Olivia executed a perfect hover despite the failing engine, completed the extraction, and navigated back through the canyon system using an entirely different route that avoided the need for the same risky maneuvers on the return journey. When the simulation ended, the hangar was completely silent. Captain Rodriguez was the first to approach as Olivia removed the VR headset. That dropping technique in the needle, Rodriguez said, her tone professional but with a new note of respect. Where did you learn that? I didn't, Olivia replied honestly. It just made sense in the moment. The canyon was guiding the air downward naturally. Fighting that would burn more fuel and create instability. Working with it solved both problems. Rodriguez exchanged glances with the other pilots. No one's ever cleared the needle on their first attempt. And your route back, it wasn't even in the simulation parameters. How did you know it would work? I didn't. But the topography suggested it would be there, and the aircraft had the range to make the detour. Weber, who had watched the entire simulation from the back of the hangar, stepped forward. This is why Hayes is joining Windwalker. She doesn't just fly the aircraft. She sees possibilities others don't. The next 6 weeks transformed Olivia's life in ways she could never have imagined. Days were filled with intensive training. Not just in flying the Kingfisher, but in understanding the full range of specialized aircraft in the Windwalker program. Nights were spent studying rescue protocols, medical procedures, and the physics of flight in extreme environments. Gradually, the team's initial skepticism gave way to cautious acceptance, then to genuine respect. Olivia's background in maintenance proved invaluable, allowing her to understand aircraft limitations and capabilities at a level few pilots could match. Her unconventional approaches to flight problems began to influence the team's standard procedures, introducing techniques that reduced risk and increased mission success rates in their training scenarios. Captain Rodriguez became an unexpected ally, recognizing in Olivia a kindred spirit who prioritized mission success over ego. Most pilots try to impose their will on the aircraft and the environment. Rodriguez commented after a particularly challenging training session. You're the first person I've met who listens to both. The real test came on a cold Tuesday morning. In late May, Olivia was reviewing maintenance logs on the Kingfisher when the Windwalker alert siren sounded throughout the base. She sprinted to the briefing room, arriving just as Colonel Weber was bringing up satellite imagery on the main screen. 4 climbers stranded on the north face of Mount Blackridge, Weber announced without preamble. Severe storm moving in. Temperatures dropping rapidly. Conventional rescue helicopters can't reach them due to the combination of altitude, weather, and the cliff face configuration. The satellite image showed the climber's position, precariously perched on a narrow ledge 9,000 feet up a sheer rock wall, with cloud cover already obscuring the peak and heavy snow beginning to fall. Local search and rescue estimates they have less than 3 hours before hypothermia becomes critical, Weber continued. The storm is expected to intensify over the next 6 hours, making any rescue attempt after that timeframe impossible until it clears, which could be days. Captain Rodriguez studied the topographical display. The approach is brutal. Wind shear near the ridgeline, near zero visibility in the cloud cover, and nowhere to land on that face. Can we hover and use rescue harnesses? Another pilot asked. Rodriguez shook her head. The cliff has a negative slope at their position. We'd need to maintain a hover at least 30 feet out from the face, in winds gusting to 60 knots, while somehow getting harnesses to them across that gap. The room fell silent as the team processed the seemingly impossible parameters. There might be a way, Olivia said quietly, stepping forward to study the 3D terrain model. The southwestern ravine cuts up toward their position. It's narrow, but the Kingfisher could navigate it in vertical flight mode. The ravine walls would provide some shelter from the main force of the wind. That gets you closer, Rodriguez. Agreed, but you'd still be dealing with terrible conditions at the extraction point, and no way to maintain stable hover in those gusts. We don't hover, Olivia replied, her mind racing as she visualized the approach. We anchor. She pointed to a rock formation just below the climber's position. We could use the rescue winch cable, secured to that outcropping, to essentially tether the Kingfisher in position against the wind. It would give us the stability we need for the extraction. Rodriguez looked skeptical. You're suggesting we physically tie an aircraft to the side of a mountain during a rescue operation? That's never been done. Because it's never been necessary, Olivia countered. But the Kingfisher's winch system is rated for twice the aircraft's weight. In theory, it could work. Colonel Weber, who had been listening silently, looked from the terrain model to Olivia. It's unorthodox, but these are precisely the situations Windwalker was created for. Captain Hayes, are you confident this approach is viable? Olivia felt the weight of the question, not just the technical aspects, but the lives that depended on her answer. Yes, Colonel. I believe it's their best chance, Weber nodded decisively. Then Kingfisher 627 will launch in 20 minutes with Hayes as pilot and Rodriguez as co-pilot. The rest of the team will provide support from base operations. As Olivia and Rodriguez prepared for the mission, the hangar buzzed with activity. The Kingfisher was being prepared with specialized equipment, including enhanced winch controls and additional rescue harnesses modified for the unusual extraction technique. You realize if this goes wrong, we're both decorating the side of that mountain, Rodriguez commented as they completed their pre-flight checks. It won't go wrong, Olivia replied with a confidence she didn't entirely feel. The Kingfisher can handle it. Rodriguez studied her for a moment. You really believe that, don't you? That aircraft isn't just machinery to you. Every aircraft has a personality, Olivia said, running her hand along the Kingfisher's control panel. This one was built for the impossible. The flight to Mount Blackridge took 47 minutes, each passing second increasing the urgency as weather conditions deteriorated. Olivia kept the Kingfisher below the cloud cover as long as possible, using the terrain-following radar to navigate the increasingly treacherous mountains. Base, this is Kingfisher 627, Rodriguez radioed as they approached the target area. Visual conditions deteriorating rapidly. Cloud ceiling now at 8,000 feet. Beginning approach to southwestern ravine. Copy, Kingfisher. Climbers report increasing snow and wind at their position. Estimated time before critical exposure, 2 hours, 15 minutes. Olivia guided the Kingfisher into the mouth of the ravine, transitioning smoothly to vertical flight mode as the passage narrowed. The aircraft responded perfectly, its specialized systems handling the transition with barely a tremor. This is where it gets interesting, Olivia commented, focusing intently on the ravine walls that loomed just feet from the rotors on either side. The wind howled through the narrow passage, creating turbulence that bounced the Kingfisher like a toy, but Olivia's hands remained steady on the controls. I've never seen anyone fly a ravine approach this tight, Rodriguez admitted, monitoring the systems while Olivia concentrated on navigation. Most pilots would have turned back by now. Most pilots haven't spent years learning how these engines sound when they're being pushed to their limits, Olivia replied, making a minute adjustment as a particularly violent gust threatened to slam them into the eastern wall. She's telling me she can handle it. The ravine twisted upward, forcing them to navigate a series of tight turns while continuing to climb. Visibility decreased as they ascended into the cloud layer, reducing their visual reference points to occasional glimpses of rock just feet from the aircraft. Switching to enhanced terrain visualization, Rodriguez announced, activating the Kingfisher's advanced sensor suite that painted a false color image of the surrounding terrain on their displays, allowing them to see through the clouds and snow. At 8,700 feet, they reached the point where the ravine opened onto the north face, just below the climber's position. The full fury of the storm hit them immediately, the Kingfisher lurching violently as 60-knot winds tried to tear it from the sky. This is why conventional rescue can't reach them, Rodriguez shouted over the howl of the engine straining against the gale. We can't maintain position in this. Olivia fought the controls, using every ounce of her skill to keep the Kingfisher relatively stable. Prepare the anchor winch. We'll only get one shot at this. Through swirling snow and cloud, they caught glimpses of the rock outcropping Olivia had identified as their anchor point. It jutted from the cliff face about 50 feet below the stranded climbers, who were now visible as bright orange specks against the gray stone. Deploying winch, Rodriguez announced, activating the system. The heavy-duty cable extended from the Kingfisher's underside, carrying a specialized anchor designed to lock securely onto rock formations. Positioning the aircraft in the violent wind was like trying to thread a needle during an earthquake. Olivia made constant micro-adjustments, fighting to maintain their position just long enough for Rodriguez to guide the anchor into place. Almost there, Rodriguez called, her eyes fixed on the winch camera display. 3 feet, 2. Contact, anchor is seated. Engaging winch lock and tension system, Olivia replied, activating the mechanism that would gradually take up slack in the cable, effectively tethering the Kingfisher to the mountainside. Starting tension at 20%. As the cable tightened, the Kingfisher's wild movements began to dampen. The aircraft was still buffeted by the wind, but now it pivoted around the fixed anchor point rather than being blown away entirely. Increasing tension to 40%, Olivia called as she felt the aircraft's response. Rodriguez, deploy the extraction harnesses. With the Kingfisher now semi-stabilized 30 feet from the cliff face, Rodriguez released 4 rescue harnesses on separate guidelines. The wind immediately caught them, threatening to tangle the lines hopelessly. The crosswind is too strong, Rodriguez shouted. We can't get the harnesses to them. Olivia studied the airflow patterns visible in the swirling snow, then made a decision. We need to use the wind, not fight it. I'm repositioning us upwind of their location. She carefully maneuvered the tethered Kingfisher, sliding laterally along the cliff face while maintaining their secure anchor. Now positioned above and to the side of the climbers, she waited for the next strong gust. Release harnesses on my mark, she called, watching the snow patterns intently. 3, 2, 1 mark. Rodriguez deployed the harnesses just as a powerful gust swept across the cliff. Instead of fighting it, Olivia had positioned them perfectly so the wind carried the harnesses directly to the stranded climbers. They've got them, Rodriguez announced, watching through the rescue camera. First climber connecting now. The extraction that followed tested every limit of both the aircraft and its crew. One by one, the climbers were winched across the 30-foot gap to the Kingfisher's rescue bay. Each transition a heart-stopping journey through howling wind and blinding snow. With each additional person aboard, the aircraft's weight increased, requiring Olivia to constantly adjust power and control inputs to maintain their precarious position. As the 4th and final climber was secured inside, Rodriguez turned to Olivia. Now for the really tricky part, getting us off this mountain. Olivia nodded grimly. We can't release the anchor until we're stable enough to weather that initial wind gust. And we can't achieve that stability while tethered. It was the ultimate catch-22, one that no simulation had prepared them for. Olivia closed her eyes. Briefly, feeling the Kingfisher straining against the tether, listening to how the engines responded to each gust of wind. We need to use the mountain, she said suddenly, opening her eyes with new determination. When I release the anchor, immediately put us into a controlled dive along the cliff face. The mountain will shield us from the worst of the crosswinds until we reach the ravine entrance. That's a negative dive angle in near-zero visibility conditions, Rodriguez pointed out. One miscalculation and we impact the cliff. It's our best option. The mountain will protect us, but only if we stay close to it. Rodriguez studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Your call, Hayes. I'm with you. Preparing to release anchor on my mark, Olivia announced, hands poised over the controls. 3, 2, 1 mark. The instant the anchor released, the Kingfisher lurched violently as the full force of the wind slammed into it. But Olivia was ready, immediately dropping the nose and diving at a steep angle parallel to the cliff face. Just as she'd predicted, the mountain created a boundary layer of relatively calmer air that allowed them enough stability to maintain control. The Kingfisher plummeted through cloud and snow, the cliff face visible only as a dark shadow on their left. Olivia flew by instinct and instrumentation, trusting her sense of the aircraft and the mountain more than her eyes. Ravine entrance. In 5 seconds, Rodriguez called, watching the terrain radar. 4, 3, 2, 1, now. Olivia pulled up sharply, transitioning from the steep dive to level flight, just as the Kingfisher shot into the relative shelter of the ravine. The sudden reduction in wind force was almost as jarring as its onset had been. "Base, this is Kingfisher 627, Rodriguez radioed, her voice betraying her relief. "Extraction complete. 4 climbers aboard, all stable, returning to base." "Understood." "Kingfisher, well done. Weather conditions continuing to deteriorate. You got out just in time." As they navigated back through the ravine, now with significantly more precious cargo, Rodriguez turned to Olivia. "That anchoring technique and the cliff face dive, those aren't in any manual I've ever read. Sometimes you have to write." "Your own manual," Olivia replied, guiding the Kingfisher through a particularly narrow section with the same confidence she'd shown throughout the mission. "That's what Windwalker is about, isn't it? Finding ways to do the impossible." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "You know, when Weber first brought you in, I thought it was a mistake. A maintenance tech with no flight experience, thrust into the most demanding rescue operations we conduct. It seemed like a recipe for disaster. And now? Now I'm thinking we've been looking in the wrong places for pilots all along. Maybe the best ones aren't the ones with perfect academy records. Maybe they're the ones who understand aircraft from the inside out." The Kingfisher's return to Westridge Air Base was met with a reception that would have been unimaginable to Olivia just months earlier. As the aircraft touched down on the snow-dusted tarmac, medical teams rushed forward to attend to the rescued climbers, while senior officers, including Colonel Weber, waited to greet the crew. The base loudspeaker, normally reserved for routine announcements, crackled to life with words that sent a shiver down Olivia's spine. "Attention all personnel. Kingfisher 627 has returned with all 4 climbers safely aboard. The first successful Operation Windwalker extraction is complete." As Olivia powered down the engines and completed the shutdown sequence, she caught Rodriguez smiling. "What?" Olivia asked, removing her helmet. "You're still running through the maintenance checklist in your head, aren't you? Even after flying the impossible mission, you're thinking about how the engines performed." Olivia returned the smile, slightly embarrassed. "Old habits. Port engine was running 3 degrees hot during the extraction. Want to check the fuel injector before the next flight." Rodriguez shook her head in amazement. "And that right there is why you just rewrote our rescue protocols. No other pilot would have noticed that mid-mission, let alone remembered it after everything else that happened." They exited the aircraft to applause, not the boisterous celebration of a sporting event, but the measured, sincere appreciation of professionals who understood exactly what had been accomplished. Colonel Weber approached first, her usually stern expression softened with unmistakable pride. "Hayes, Rodriguez, exceptional work. The anchored extraction technique has been officially designated Protocol Hayes for future operations. It's already being incorporated into the Windwalker training program." Olivia blinked in surprise. "Protocol Hayes?" "We name breakthrough techniques after their creators," Weber explained. "What you develop today will save lives for years to come." Before Olivia could respond, a commotion at the edge of the tarmac drew their attention. A group of pilots had gathered around a newly arrived helicopter, its civilian markings identifying it as belonging to a news organization. A camera crew. was setting up equipment while a reporter gestured animatedly toward the Kingfisher. Weber's expression darkened immediately. "Perkins," she muttered, nodding toward a tall woman with perfectly styled hair who was clearly directing the news team. "Channel 8's aviation specialist, though I doubt she could tell a propeller from a pretzel." "How did they find out about the mission so quickly?" Rodriguez asked. "Social media," Weber replied grimly. "Someone in the climbers' circle posted about the rescue attempt. Normally we'd restrict media access, but..." She gestured toward the civilian medical teams and family members who had arrived to support the rescued climbers. This was a civilian rescue on public land. "We can't keep them away entirely." Olivia felt a flicker of unease. Her entire career had been spent in the background, in hangars and maintenance bays, far from cameras and reporters. The thought of public attention made her profoundly uncomfortable. "Colonel, do we need to?" "Yes, you do," Weber interrupted, correctly interpreting Olivia's question. "Like it or not, Hayes, what you accomplished today matters beyond this base. People need to understand that the impossible is sometimes possible after all." She softened her tone slightly. "Just stick to the approved narrative, emphasize the team effort, downplay the technical details of the extraction method, and redirect any questions about Windwalker to me." Before Olivia could protest further, the reporter had spotted them and was approaching with her camera crew in tow, microphone already extended like a weapon. "Colonel Weber," the reporter called. "Camilla Perkins, Channel 8 News. Is it true that your team just performed a rescue that Mountain Search and Rescue declared impossible? And is this the pilot who did it?" She thrust the microphone toward Olivia, whose instinct was to step back. Weber smoothly intercepted. "Ms. Perkins, Westridge Air Base was proud to assist in today's successful rescue operation. Captain Hayes and Captain Rodriguez demonstrated exceptional skill in challenging conditions. We're grateful for the opportunity to help bring 4 climbers home safely to their families." Perkins wasn't deterred. "Captain Hayes," she pressed, sidestepping Weber to address Olivia directly. "Sources tell me you developed a completely new rescue technique on the fly. Is it true you actually tethered your aircraft to the mountain?" Olivia glanced at Weber, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "We adapted to the conditions," Olivia replied carefully. "The Kingfisher aircraft is designed for specialized rescue operations in challenging environments. Today's mission required creative problem-solving. And is it also true that until 3 months ago, you were working as a maintenance technician, not a pilot?" The question caught Olivia off guard. She hadn't expected her background to be public knowledge. "Captain Hayes has extensive aviation experience," Weber interjected firmly. "Westridge Air Base recognizes talent in many forms." But the reporter had sensed a story angle and wasn't letting go. "How does a maintenance tech end up flying one of the most dangerous rescue missions of the year? That's quite a career change, isn't it?" Something in Olivia shifted. The question wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who had ever been overlooked, everyone whose talents had been dismissed because they came in an unexpected package. She straightened her shoulders and looked directly into the camera. "I spent 5 years learning how these aircraft breathe," she said, her voice steady. "How they sound when they're healthy, how they feel when something's wrong. When you understand a machine that deeply, flying it becomes a natural extension of that knowledge." Perkins blinked, clearly not expecting such a response. "Are you saying being a mechanic made you a better pilot?" "I'm saying that greatness doesn't always come from the expected places," Olivia replied. "Sometimes the person who can solve the impossible problem is the one everyone overlooked." The interview continued for several more minutes, but that exchange became the soundbite that rocketed across news networks and social media platforms throughout the evening. By morning, "The mechanic who flew the impossible" had become a national headline, complete with dramatic footage of the Kingfisher disappearing into the storm clouds around Mount Blackridge. Olivia awoke to find her phone flooded with messages. Old friends who had seen the news, former colleagues expressing amazement, and even her first flight instructor from years ago, who wrote simply, "I always knew, so proud of you." The base, too, had transformed overnight. Where once she had walked through hangars largely unnoticed, now conversations paused when she entered a room, and eyes followed her movements with a mixture of curiosity and newfound respect. But the most significant change came 3 days after the rescue, when Olivia arrived at Hangar 12 for a scheduled training session to find Chief Master Sergeant Donovan waiting for her, along with a group of young maintenance technicians she recognized from various departments around the base. "Chief?" she questioned, surprised to see her former supervisor in the Windwalker facility. Donovan smiled, an expression she had rarely seen on his usually stern face. "Colonel Weber approved my request. These techs wanted to meet you." A young woman stepped forward, her maintenance uniform crisp, but her hands bearing the unmistakable signs of someone who worked with tools daily. "Captain Hayes," she began hesitantly, "we were hoping you might talk to us about how you made the transition from maintenance to flight. Many of us have been told we don't have what it takes to be pilots, but after seeing what you did..." Olivia looked at the group, 6 young technicians, their expressions a mixture of hope and uncertainty, and saw herself as she had been 5 years ago, talented, dedicated, but convinced that certain doors were permanently closed to her. "The first thing you need to understand," she said, gesturing for them to follow her toward the Kingfisher, "is that your maintenance background isn't a limitation, it's your greatest strength." Over the following weeks, Olivia's unofficial mentorship program grew from those 6 technicians to over 20. With Colonel Weber's blessing, she established a formal pathway for maintenance personnel to receive flight aptitude testing and, for those who qualified, specialized training that leveraged their unique understanding of aircraft systems. "You're building something important here," Weber commented one evening, finding Olivia in the simulator room working late with 3 of her protégés. "Something that goes beyond rescue techniques or flight protocols. Just passing on what I've learned," Olivia replied, watching as a young technician executed a perfect canyon approach in the simulator. "No," Weber said thoughtfully, "you're changing the culture. For decades, we've drawn arbitrary lines between those who fix the aircraft and those who fly them. You're erasing those lines." The success of the Mount Blackridge rescue and Olivia's subsequent media attention had another unexpected effect. It brought Operation Windwalker out of the shadows and into the spotlight. What had begun as a classified program with limited resources suddenly found itself the darling of military aviation, with increased funding, expanded facilities, and a waiting list of pilots eager to join. But with higher visibility came greater scrutiny. 6 weeks after the Blackridge mission, Olivia was called to Colonel Weber's office to find not just Weber, but Major General Thomas Harrington, the Air Force's Deputy Chief of Operations, waiting for her. "Captain Hayes," the general greeted her, his expression unreadable. "Congratulations on your recent successes. Operation Windwalker has impressed a lot of people in Washington." "Thank you, sir," Olivia replied cautiously, sensing there was more to this visit than simple congratulations. "The Joint Chiefs have taken a particular interest in Protocol Hayes," he continued. "The ability to conduct rescue operations in conditions previously deemed impossible has significant implications beyond civilian applications." Weber and Harrington exchanged glances. "The General is here to discuss expanding Windwalker's operational parameters," Weber explained carefully. "There's interest in adapting your techniques for other scenarios." Olivia understood immediately. "Combat missions." Harrington nodded. "Extraction of personnel from hostile territory, infiltration of special operations teams into areas with extreme terrain. The applications are numerous and potentially game-changing." "With respect, sir," Olivia said slowly, "Protocol Hayes was developed specifically for rescue operations. The techniques prioritize the safety of the extracted personnel over all other considerations, including potential exposure of the aircraft. And that philosophy would be maintained, Harrington assured her. But surely you can see the value in applying your innovations more broadly. Olivia thought about it carefully. There was nothing inherently problematic about adapting rescue techniques for other humanitarian operations, but she sensed a slippery slope. I would need to be directly involved in any adaptation of the protocol, she said finally, to ensure the core principles aren't compromised. Harrington smiled. That's precisely why I'm here, Captain. We want you to lead the expansion program. New aircraft, additional personnel, increased operational scope, all under your direction. The offer was stunning in its scale. A captain with less than a year of official flight experience being offered what amounted to command of a major program expansion. It was the kind of opportunity most officers waited decades for, if they ever received it at all. I'm honored, sir, but before you respond, Harrington interrupted, there's something else you should see. He opened a folder and spread several photographs across Weber's desk. They showed various angles of a sleek, unfamiliar aircraft with both fixed wings and what appeared to be advanced rotors. The 1544 Peregrine, Harrington explained. Next-generation rescue and insertion aircraft, designed specifically for the kind of operations Windwalker specializes in. Simplified text for CapCut AI voice. The plane is being built at Lockheed's special workshop. It uses ideas from your canyon rescue method. Olivia looked at the photos with interest and wonder. The Peregrine was clearly new and amazing, smaller than the Kingfisher, but with systems that worked better in tough places. The first new model will be sent to Westridge in 2 months, Harrington said. We want you to be the main test pilot. It was a great offer. But Olivia waited before answering. Can I ask why you picked me? There are test pilots with much more experience. Harrington sat back in his chair. Because test pilots follow rules. They do careful tests that check known limits. His face showed more excitement. But you, Hayes, you see things others miss. You don't just push limits, you ignore them when needed. That's what we need for a plane built to do impossible things. The meeting ended with Olivia saying she would think about it, though both Weber and Harrington clearly expected her to say yes. As they shook hands, Harrington said something that stayed with her long after he left. You know, Hayes, when I first heard about a repair worker who became a rescue pilot overnight, I didn't believe it. But then I watched the video from Blackridge, and I learned something important. Sometimes the biggest changes don't come from where we expect. They come from people who don't know what they're not supposed to be able to do. The next weeks were very busy. While still leading Windwalker rescue missions and teaching her growing group of repair workers who wanted to become pilots, Olivia was now working on the Peregrine program. Weekly video calls with the design team, technical papers to read, and endless questions about how her rescue methods could work better with plane systems. Through it all, she kept flying regular missions in the Kingfisher, refusing to stop flying because of her new office work. It was during one normal patrol flight, with Rodriguez as her co-pilot again, that the call came in that would change the next part of her career. Kingfisher 627. This is Westridge Control with urgent message, the radio said. We have a problem. At Salvation Point, research station workers report building collapse from avalanche, multiple injuries, fire spreading through remaining buildings. Rodriguez quickly looked up the location data. Salvation Point? That's the High Mountain Climate Research Station in the Sierra Nevada mountains. It's at 12,500 feet, built into the side of a ridge. Correct, Kingfisher, Control confirmed. Local fire and rescue tried to get there, but had to turn back because of conditions. Station reports at least 6 people trapped in the main lab section, with fire spreading from the collapsed living area. Olivia checked their fuel and position. We're 70 miles away with full tanks. Weather at the target? getting worse fast. Heavy snow, winds up to 70 miles per hour, and the avalanche made the snow unsafe throughout the area. Risk of more slides is very high, Rodriguez looked at Olivia. This is very hard, even for us. That ridge is known for wild wind patterns, and with fire damaging the building. Kingfisher 627, he told. Control added, we have a test peregrine. Coming to your position with General Harrington on board. Time to reach you, 12 minutes. This was unexpected. The peregrine wasn't supposed to be delivered for several more weeks, and Harrington being there meant something big was happening. Copy, Control, still heading towards Salvation Point. 11 minutes later, Olivia saw the peregrine coming from the east, a dark, smooth shape moving very fast through the cloud layer. Even from far away, its advanced design was clear in the way it cut through rough air that would have shaken the Kingfisher a lot. Kingfisher 627. This is Peregrine Actual. Harrington's voice came through clearly on the secure channel. We've been watching the Salvation Point situation. I've moved up the Peregrine's schedule to get it here today. Copy, Peregrine. Good. Timing, what's your plan? That's why I'm here, Hayes. This isn't my plane to fly into that situation. It's yours. Olivia felt her breath stop. Sir? The Peregrine was built with your methods in mind. You're the best person to test it in real rescue conditions. We'll do an air-to-air transfer. You and Rodriguez to the Peregrine, my pilot and I to the Kingfisher. We'll provide support while you take the main rescue role. It was unheard of, switching to an unknown test plane mid-mission to try a high-risk rescue in extreme conditions. But as Olivia studied the Peregrine flying next to them, she felt an instant connection to its design, seeing parts that had clearly been influenced by her own methods and feedback. Copy that, General. Starting formation. Flight for crew transfer. The mid-air transfer was done perfectly, the two planes staying in perfect position relative to each other as Olivia and Rodriguez crossed from the familiar space of the Kingfisher to the unknown territory of the Peregrine. As Olivia sat in the pilot's seat, she was struck by how natural the control layout felt, different from the Kingfisher, yet somehow familiar, as if built just for her hands. All systems working, reported the Peregrine's flight engineer, a young officer who stayed on board to help with the test plane's advanced features. Captain Hayes, the plane is yours. As Olivia took the controls, the Peregrine responded with a sensitivity that took her breath away. Every input produced immediate, exact results, the plane guessing her intentions almost before she fully formed them. Rodriguez, are you feeling this? She asked, doing a test turn that the Peregrine completed with remarkable sharpness. It's like they built it from your brain, Rodriguez replied, equally impressed. The control response is exactly how you always said the Kingfisher should feel. They reached Salvation Point 23 minutes later, the research station coming into view through swirling snow, a group of connected buildings built into a ridge at the edge of a steep drop. The damage was immediately clear. The eastern wing had completely collapsed under the avalanche, and orange flames were visible through windows in the central section. A second snowslide had carried away part of the access road, leaving no ground approach possible. I count 4 heat signals in the main lab, Rodriguez reported, studying the advanced sensor display. 2 more in what appears to be a storage area next to it. Fire is spreading from east to west. They've got maybe 15 minutes before it reaches the lab. Olivia looked at the situation quickly. The normal approach, hovering above the station and lowering rescue people, was impossible because of the fire and unsafe snow. Landing anywhere near the building risked causing another avalanche that could finish the destruction already happening. Then she saw it. A narrow, flat section of ridge about 60 yards west of the station, connected to the main building by what appeared to be a maintenance walkway now partly covered in snow. There, she pointed. We can land on that ledge, use the walkway to reach the main building, and get the people out along the same route. That ledge is barely bigger than the Peregrine, Rodriguez noted. And the crosswinds at that position will be extreme. The Peregrine can handle it, Olivia replied with certainty, already feeling how the plane was responding to the rough air around the ridge. This is what it was built for. She guided the Peregrine through a careful approach pattern, using the land to block the worst of the wind while she looked at the landing zone. The ledge was indeed tiny, perhaps 10 feet longer than the Peregrine. On each end, with a straight drop of several thousand feet on 3 sides. "Hayes, this is Harrington and Kingfisher support," the radio crackled. "That landing zone is outside safe limits. Recommend you stop and we'll try extraction from above. Despite the risks." "No, sir," Olivia replied calmly. "The Peregrine can make this landing. We've got 6 lives depending on us getting this right the first time." There was a brief pause. "Your call, Hayes. We'll hold position to watch and support." Olivia began. The final approach, the Peregrine responding to her touch with remarkable precision. The crosswinds hit the plane hard, but its advanced stability systems compensated beautifully, allowing her to maintain perfect alignment with the narrow ledge. 50 feet, Rodriguez called out, watching their descent. Winds gusting to 65 miles per hour from the northwest. Ledge size confirmed, 62 feet by 28 feet. The Peregrine's landing gear touched down with a gentle bump, the plane settling perfectly centered on the tiny space. Olivia kept the engines at idle power, ready to lift off instantly if the snow beneath them showed any signs of being unsafe. "Safe landing," she confirmed. "Rodriguez, lead the extraction team." Emma Chun stepped onto the rugged training grounds of Fort Blackwater with boots that seemed too big for her 5'2" frame. Her petite body was almost swallowed by the standard issue fatigues that hung loose despite alterations. At 28, she looked nothing like the towering soldiers who dominated the elite rescue training facility. No one could have guessed that this small woman they dismissed would soon carry 3 wounded men to safety through conditions that broke even the strongest recruits. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Emma hadn't been back to a military installation in 3 years. Not since she'd walked away from her promising career after a mission that left her questioning everything. Today, she was here as an observer, accompanying her friend Dr. Nadia. Wright, a trauma specialist invited to assess the facility's medical evacuation protocols. Fort Blackwater wasn't just any training center. It was the premier combat rescue facility where the military's most physically imposing soldiers came to earn their elite status. Everything about Fort Blackwater screamed strength and power. The obstacle courses were designed to challenge even Olympic athletes. The medical simulation buildings recreated the most challenging extraction scenarios imaginable. The training equipment cost millions, and the soldiers selected for the program were chosen primarily for their physical capabilities. Most stood over 6 feet tall with builds that intimidated at first glance. Their gear was cutting edge, their muscles were sculpted to perfection, and their confidence matched their imposing stature. Emma carried only a small backpack containing a notebook, water bottle, and a few protein bars. She walked with quiet confidence, her eyes unconsciously scanning the facility, noting exit routes, calculating distances, identifying potential hazards. Old habits never really disappeared. The stairs began immediately. A cluster of trainees near the equipment shed didn't even try to lower their voices. "Who let the high school student in?" one said, his voice carrying across the yard. "Bring your daughter to work day was last month." A woman with broad shoulders and arms that could probably bench press Emma's entire body looked her up and down. "What's she going to do in an emergency?" "Ask the enemy to please stop shooting while she finds a step stool." The mockery wasn't subtle or kind. To them, Emma was an anomaly, a disruption to their understanding of what a rescue specialist should look like. They saw her small stature and automatically filed her under incapable. The jokes continued as Emma stood quietly, observing the training preparations without reaction. "Maybe she's here to test the child-sized dummies," another trainee suggested, generating a burst of laughter from his companions. Emma didn't speak or defend herself. She simply stood there, composed and still, watching as the training teams assembled their gear for the day's exercises. The facility kept watching her too, judging her, measuring her against their narrow definition of capability, and ultimately dismissing her. They had no idea that the woman they saw as insignificant would soon become the most important person any of them would. "Remember." Dr. Wright emerged from the command building and approached Emma with an apologetic smile. "Sorry about the delay. Command briefing ran long." "I see you've been making friends," she added sarcastically, noticing the not-so-subtle glances from the trainees. "Nothing I haven't heard before," Emma replied, her voice calm and measured. "What's on the agenda today?" "They're running extraction simulations in the mountain terrain course. Multiple casualties, hostile conditions, the works. We'll be observing from the command center." Dr. Wright gestured toward a building with tinted windows, overlooking the massive training grounds. As they walked, Emma felt the weight of dozens of eyes following her. The whispers continued, some amused, others dismissive. One instructor even chuckled openly as she passed. Emma's expression never changed. She'd faced worse than playground bullies in her career. Inside the command center, screens displayed various angles of the training course. Rescue teams were gearing up, checking equipment, and reviewing extraction protocols. Emma recognized the routine, the methodical preparation that meant the difference between life and death in real-world scenarios. On the largest screen, Lieutenant Marcus Davidson was briefing his team, his 6'4" frame dominating the huddle of equally imposing soldiers. "That's their star performer," Dr. Wright explained, nodding toward Davidson. "Former football player, built like a tank, can carry 200 pounds of gear uphill without breaking a sweat. Command thinks he's their next great leader." Emma studied him silently, noting his confident stance, the way his team responded to him, the slight hitch in his preparation routine that spoke of overconfidence rather than thoroughness. Colonel Patricia Rivera entered the command center, her crisp uniform and ramrod posture demanding immediate respect. Her eyes landed on Emma, narrowed slightly, then moved to Dr. Wright. "Doctor, glad you could join us. The observation deck is prepared for your assessment." Her voice was professionally cordial, but carried an edge that suggested she viewed this entire assessment as an unnecessary formality. Dr. Wright nodded. "Thank you, Colonel. This is Emma Chun, my assistant for today's observation." Rivera's gaze returned to Emma, traveling from her small frame to her unassuming appearance, making no attempt to hide her skepticism. "Miss Chun, this is a restricted facility. Observers must remain in designated areas at all times. This is not a spectator sport. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." "Understood, Colonel," Emma replied simply. The Colonel's eyebrow raised slightly at Emma's calm response, as if she'd expected nervousness or intimidation. Finding neither, she turned back to the screens. "Teams will deploy in 15 minutes. Weather conditions on the mountain have deteriorated faster than anticipated. We're looking at heavy rain, poor visibility, and temperatures dropping below what was forecast." She spoke to the room at large, though her words seemed particularly directed at Dr. Wright. "These are the conditions our people train for. Real rescues don't wait for sunny days," Dr. Wright nodded. "We're not here to interfere, Colonel, only to observe and assess." The mockery continues as Emma and Dr. Wright make their way to the observation deck, a raised platform at the edge of the base camp, that offers a clear view of the mountain training grounds. The rain has started, light at first but steadily increasing in intensity. Teams are finalizing their equipment checks, double wrapping sensitive gear against the weather. Lieutenant Davidson spots Emma as she takes her position at the observation rail. He nudges his second-in-command, nodding in her direction with an amused expression. "Hey, Tiny," he calls out, his voice carrying easily across the staging area. "You might want to head inside. Wouldn't want you to blow away in the wind." His team laughs on cue, the sound rippling across the yard. Emma remains still, her expression unchanging as she continues to observe the preparations. "I'm serious," Davidson continues, encouraged by his team's reaction. "We've got 3 dummy casualties up there that weigh more than you do. 1 good gust and you'll end up in the next county." More laughter. Emma shifts her weight slightly, adjusting her stance against the increasing wind, but says nothing. Her silence seems to irritate Davidson more than any response would have. "What's the matter, Shortstack? Can't hear me from up there?" He cups his hands around his mouth in an exaggerated gesture. "Need me to lift you up so you can see better?" Dr. Wright steps forward, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. "Lieutenant, perhaps you should focus on your mission preparations rather than harassing observers." Davidson's smile doesn't falter. "Just concerned for safety, ma'am." She looks like she belongs in middle school, not a combat rescue facility. Emma places a hand on Dr. Wright's arm, a gentle request to let it go. She's heard worse, much worse, and responded with the same steady silence. She's learned that some battles aren't worth fighting, especially against those who've already decided what you're capable of, based on appearances. Another team leader, Sergeant Maya Ortiz, approaches Davidson with a disapproving expression. "Cut it out, Mark. You're embarrassing yourself." She glances at Emma with something that might be respect, or at least professional courtesy. "Sorry about him. Some people never outgrow high school." Davidson shrugs, unrepentant. "Just having some fun, Ortiz. Not my fault they sent us a pocket-sized observer." Ortiz shakes her head and returns to her team, clearly uncomfortable with Davidson's behavior, but unwilling to challenge him further. The power dynamics are obvious. Davidson is the golden boy, the one expected to lead this exercise to perfect completion. Few are willing to risk his displeasure. As the teams begin moving toward their deployment positions, a trainee with Rodriguez stitched on his uniform breaks away momentarily, passing near Emma. He holds out a child-sized raincoat, bright yellow, and clearly borrowed from the facility's family visitor supplies. "Here," he says loudly enough for his teammates to hear. "This might fit you better. Don't want you catching cold out here with the grown-ups." What had begun as a classified program with limited resources suddenly found itself the darling of military aviation, with increased funding, expanded facilities, and a waiting list of pilots eager to join. But with higher visibility came greater scrutiny. 6 weeks after the Black Ridge mission, Olivia was called to Colonel Weber's office to find not just Weber, but Major General Thomas Harrington, the Air Force's Deputy Chief of Operations, waiting. For her, Captain Hayes, the general greeted her, his expression unreadable. "Congratulations on your recent successes. Operation Windwalker has impressed a lot of people in Washington." "Thank you, sir," Olivia replied cautiously, sensing there was more to this visit than simple congratulations. "The Joint Chiefs have taken a particular interest in Protocol Hayes," he continued. "The ability to conduct rescue operations in conditions previously deemed impossible has significant implications beyond civilian applications." Weber and Harrington exchanged glances. "The general is here to discuss expanding Windwalker's operational parameters," Weber explained carefully. "There's interest in adapting your techniques for other scenarios." Olivia understood immediately. "Combat missions." Harrington nodded. "Extraction of personnel from hostile territory. Infiltration of special operations teams into areas with extreme terrain." The applications are numerous and potentially game-changing. With respect, sir, Olivia said slowly, Protocol Hayes was developed specifically for rescue operations. The techniques prioritize the safety of the extracted personnel over all other considerations, including potential exposure of the aircraft. And that philosophy would be maintained, Harrington assured her. But surely you can see the value in applying your innovations more broadly. Olivia thought about it carefully. There was nothing inherently problematic about adapting rescue techniques for other humanitarian operations, but she sensed a slippery slope. I would need to be directly involved in any adaptation of the protocol, she said finally, to ensure the core principles aren't compromised. Harrington smiled. That's precisely why I'm here, Captain. We want you to lead the expansion program. New aircraft, additional personnel, increased operational scope, all under your direction. The offer was stunning in its scale. A captain with less than a year of official flight experience being offered what amounted to command of a major program expansion. It was the kind of opportunity most officers waited decades for, if they ever received it at all. I'm honored, sir, but before you respond, Harrington interrupted, there's something else you should see. He opened a folder and spread several photographs across Weber's desk. They showed various angles of a sleek, unfamiliar aircraft with both fixed wings and what appeared to be advanced rotors. The 1544 Peregrine, Harrington explained. Next-generation rescue and insertion aircraft, designed specifically for the kind of operations Windwalker specializes in. Currently in final development at Lockheed's Skunk Works facility. It incorporates several features inspired by your canyon extraction technique. Olivia studied the photographs with a mixture of professional interest and genuine awe. The Peregrine was clearly revolutionary, smaller than the Kingfisher, but with systems that suggested far greater capability in extreme environments. The first production model will be delivered to Westridge within 2 months, Harrington continued. We want you to be its primary test pilot. It was, by any measure, an extraordinary offer. Yet Olivia found herself hesitating. May I ask why me, specifically? There are test pilots with far more experience. Harrington leaned back in his chair. Because test pilots follow protocols. They execute carefully planned evaluation procedures, designed to explore known parameters. His expression grew more animated. But you, Hayes, you see possibilities no one else recognizes. You don't just push boundaries. You ignore them entirely when necessary. That's exactly what we need. For an aircraft designed to do the impossible. The meeting concluded with Olivia agreeing to consider the offer, though both Weber and Harrington clearly expected her acceptance. As they shook hands, Harrington made one final comment that stayed with her long after he departed. You know, Hayes, when I first heard about a maintenance tech who became a rescue pilot overnight, I was skeptical. But then I watched the footage from Black Ridge, and I understood something profound. Sometimes the most revolutionary advances don't come from where we expect them. They come from people who don't know what they're not supposed to be able to do. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. While continuing to lead Windwalker rescue operations and mentor her growing cohort of maintenance techs turned pilot candidates, Olivia now found herself deeply involved in the Peregrine program. Weekly video conferences with the design team at Skunk Works, technical specifications to review, and endless questions about how her extraction techniques could be better supported by aircraft systems. Throughout it all, she continued to fly. Regular missions in the Kingfisher, refusing to be grounded by her increasing administrative responsibilities. It was during one such routine patrol flight, with Rodriguez once again as her co-pilot, that the call came in that would define the next chapter of her career. Kingfisher 627. This is Westridge Control with priority override, the radio crackled. We have a situation developing at Salvation Point. Research station personnel reporting structural collapse due to avalanche. Multiple injuries. Fire spreading through remaining structures. Rodriguez immediately pulled up the location data. Salvation Point? That's the high-altitude climate research station in the Sierra Nevadas. It's at 12,500 feet, built into the side of a ridge. Correct, Kingfisher, Control confirmed. Local fire and rescue attempted approach, but were forced to turn back due to conditions. Station reports at least 6 personnel trapped in the main. Laboratory section with fire spreading from the collapsed residential wing. Olivia checked their fuel and position. We're 70 miles out with full tanks. Weather conditions at the target? Deteriorating rapidly. Heavy snow, winds gusting to 70 knots, and the avalanche has created unstable snow conditions throughout. The area, risk of secondary slides is extreme. Rodriguez exchanged a glance with Olivia. This is beyond challenging, even for us. That ridge is notorious for unpredictable wind patterns, and with fire compromising the structure. Kingfisher 627, be advised, Control added. We have a prototype peregrine en route to your position with General Harrington aboard. 80 to your coordinates. 12 minutes. This was unexpected. The peregrine wasn't scheduled for delivery for several more weeks, and Harrington's presence suggested something significant was happening. Hayes, be advised, Harrington's voice cut in urgently. Our sensors are detecting movement in the snowpack above the station. High probability of secondary avalanche within the next 2 to 5 minutes. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.